They possessed it all: celebrity, wealth, and visages cherished by millions. Yet away from the camera's glare, their lives spiraled into the world of handcuffs, courtroom battles, and the chilling reality of concrete cells. How do Hollywood's most luminous women plummet from luxurious estates to behind steel bars? Was it sheer arrogance, a crippling addiction, or an industry that revels in elevating idols just to witness their fiery demise? From household names to figures now faded from memory, these actresses once commanded the red carpet, only to find themselves exchanging designer couture for standard-issue orange jumpsuits. Some took on the law and were defeated. Others believed their fame was an impenetrable shield, until reality delivered a blow more severe than any scripted drama. What truly unfolds when stardom becomes self-destructive? This is the side of Hollywood that is kept in the shadows. The downfall of those once deemed untouchable. 15. Lindsay Lohan. There was a period when Lindsay Lohan was the undisputed sovereign of Hollywood. From her breakout role in The Parent Trap to her iconic reign in Mean Girls, she was the very embodiment of talent meeting beauty. A child prodigy who appeared destined for legendary status in Hollywood, but the fairy tale was short-lived. Fame arrived too swiftly, and the spotlight's heat became unbearable. Soon enough, Lindsay's name was no longer on movie marquees, but on a police mugshot. Her descent began with a cascade of DUI arrests, reckless driving incidents, and probation violations that transformed her life into a relentless media spectacle. What initially seemed like the harmless fun of a party girl devolved into the tragic depiction of a starlet unable to conquer her personal demons. Hollywood stood by and watched as she cycled through rehabilitation centers, courtrooms, and even the Los Angeles County Jail. For an actress who once commanded millions per picture, her greatest battle became the simple act of staying free. But Lindsay's narrative was more than just a tale of rebellion. It was a story about Hollywood's voracious appetite for watching its young women crumble. Every single error she made was magnified into a headline, every relapse a public performance. By the time she completed her brief jail terms, the same industry that once celebrated her had already cast her aside for newer, fresher talents. Years on, Lohan has attempted to rebuild her public image with reality television, smaller roles, and even business enterprises in Europe. Yet the shadow of her criminal past has never fully receded. She remains a chilling emblem of what occurs when Hollywood fame collides with youth and chaos. Her time behind bars was fleeting, but her sentence of public humiliation and a damaged legacy has proven far more enduring. Lindsay didn't simply serve time in jail. She transformed into a living warning that in the world of Hollywood, even the most cherished golden girl can plummet hard enough to meet the cold floor of a cell. 14. Lori Loughlin. For many years, Lori Loughlin was America's sweetheart. The sophisticated, smiling face from Full House, a beacon of wholesome perfection. To millions, she was the personification of all things clean, family-friendly, and inherently good. However, behind that polished veneer, a quiet secret was brewing. One that would erupt into one of the most startling scandals in modern Hollywood. In the now infamous college admission scandal, Loughlin and her husband faced accusations of paying enormous sums of money to rig their daughter's admission into an elite university. It was not a violent offense, but it struck a deep cultural nerve, the image of privilege and power being used to corrupt the system. When the FBI arrests became public news, America was aghast. Aunt Becky had become a federal defendant. For someone who had built an entire career on grace and decency, the spectacle of Loughlin striding into court in a pristine white suit was nothing short of surreal. Her fall from public grace wasn't explosive or theatrical. It was a quiet, humbling, and profoundly public ordeal. In the end, she served a short sentence in prison. But the repercussions proved to be irreversible. The industry turned its back on her, and endorsement deals evaporated into thin air. Her squeaky clean reputation, the very bedrock of her celebrity, was fractured beyond any hope of repair. Behind bars, she reportedly became a recluse, immersing herself in books, prayer, and deep reflection on the chasm her actions had created from the world she once championed. Her release was met with a storm of tears and headlines. But it did not bring forgiveness. The public that had once adoringly cheered for her now saw her as a symptom of a much larger disease, the profound entitlement of the rich and famous. The tale of Lori Loughlin is not one of violence or dependency. Rather, it is a story about a grand illusion. It was the illusion that fame is an all-access pass to purchase anything, even a person's own integrity. And when that fantasy shattered, it exposed a much darker reality. It revealed just how swiftly Hollywood can demote its angels to the status of cautionary tales. Number 13. Felicity Huffman. Felicity Huffman was never considered the type to be embroiled in scandal. Renowned for her commanding performance in Desperate Housewives and her Oscar-nominated role in Transamerica, she exuded the presence of a serious artist, respected, grounded, and worlds away from the fodder of tabloid drama. That is precisely why the world was left utterly astounded when her name surfaced in the exact same college admissions controversy as Lori Loughlin. This was not just another celebrity blunder. It was a quiet betrayal of every value she appeared to represent. Huffman confessed to paying for her daughter's SAT scores to be illicitly altered, a choice she later lamented as the biggest mistake of my life. Her forthrightness in court may have secured her a shorter sentence, but the public humiliation was absolute. Cameras trailed her all the way to prison, capturing a once elegant woman in plain beige sweats, stripped of every last vestige of Hollywood glamour. She ultimately served just a few weeks in confinement. Yet those few days etched a lifelong scar, serving as a stark reminder that even the best intentions can obliterate a legacy when privilege is allowed to corrupt fairness. Unlike many celebrities who defensively fight back or deny all accusations, Felicity fully owned her transgression. She wept, issued a public apology, and faced her punishment with a quiet sense of dignity. The industry, however, was not nearly as forgiving. Acting roles vanished, potential projects fell silent, and her name became a byword for deceit. It was a harsh and unforgiving lesson in the ways of Tinseltown. Sincerity, it turns out, does not always pave the road to redemption. Still, Huffman's narrative contains a faint glimmer of hope. She has slowly been returning to her acting career, embracing smaller roles that seem to reflect an older, more contemplative version of herself. The spotlight no longer serves to flatter her. Instead, it exposes her raw humanity. And perhaps that is the ultimate truth of her fall from grace. Felicity Huffman did not end up in prison because she was an evil person. She went because she was human, flawed, desperate, and ultimately blinded by the fierce intensity of a mother's love. In the end, her time within that prison cell became something more than just a punishment. It was a mirror, one that showed her the very thing Hollywood had made her forget: humility. Number 12. Winona Ryder. In the 1990s, Winona Ryder was an untouchable force. She was the gothic queen of cool, the fragile beauty in Edward Scissorhands, and the very voice for every outsider who desperately dreamed of being seen. She was intelligent, enigmatic, and utterly magnetic. But on one fateful winter afternoon in Beverly Hills, that entire image was shattered in an instant. Surveillance footage captured her strolling out of Saks Fifth Avenue with thousands of dollars in unpaid designer apparel. Within just a few hours, The story exploded across the globe as Winona Ryder was arrested for shoplifting. It wasn't the crime itself that left Hollywood stunned, it was the sheer absurdity of the act. A millionaire actress pilfering handbags and dresses. For a great many people, it seemed like a clear act of self-sabotage. For others, it was perceived as a desperate cry for help. In court, Ryder appeared pale and broken, a world away from the poetic heroines she had so memorably portrayed. The media branded her Winona Swipe, and filmmakers silently removed her from their casting lists. A conviction was inevitable. Her sentence included probation, community service, and court-ordered counseling. Yet, behind the sensational headlines, the reality was far more complicated. Ryder later revealed she was emotionally exhausted, heavily medicated, and completely lost after years inside the Hollywood machine. She wasn't motivated by greed, she was simply drowning in exhaustion. Her public fall from grace exposed a truth that most stars dare not admit. Fame offers no protection from loneliness, anxiety, or the profound need to feel alive again. Over the following years, Winona painstakingly rebuilt her life. Her triumphant return in Stranger Things was far more than a simple comeback. It was a genuine resurrection. She made no attempt to erase her past. She owned it, but that infamous mugshot from 2 decades ago still shadows her, a chilling reminder that even the most cherished star can buckle under an invisible weight. Winona Ryder never actually served time in a prison cell, but her sentence was a different kind of confinement. Years of exile from the world that had once revered her. And when she finally returned, it wasn't as a flawless icon, but as living proof that being broken doesn't mean you are defeated. Number 11. Michelle Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez has always projected a raw, fearless energy, the very power that made her the perfect choice for the Fast and Furious franchise and every role that demanded intensity. She was never the delicate Hollywood ingenue. She was the rebel, the fighter, the woman who made toughness seem effortless. But away from the set, that same untamed spirit frequently descended into chaos. And Michelle's life began to eerily mirror the reckless characters she so convincingly played. Her legal troubles began with several DUI arrests and violations that hinted at a deeper struggle. The sort of self-destructive spiral that fame often conceals behind the flash of red carpets. In the mid-2000s, she was sentenced to jail for driving under the influence and for violating her probation. Her incarceration was brief but deeply symbolic. Hollywood's resident tough girl had finally found herself on the wrong side of the system she thought she could outmaneuver. Unlike many stars who hide behind public relations teams, Michelle confronted her mistakes directly. She openly admitted to having issues with anger, a notoriously short fuse, and a thirst for danger. These exact traits made her magnetic on screen, but destructive in her real life. Her time behind bars forced her to confront that dangerous edge. She later referred to it as a necessary wake-up call, one that made her truly understand how fragile freedom can be. After her release, she re-emerged even stronger. Hollywood welcomed her back, but her reputation had fundamentally changed. She was no longer just an actress. She was now seen as a survivor. The time she spent in jail didn't end her career. It refined it. It stripped away the illusions of fame, leaving only pure grit. Today, Rodriguez still navigates that fine line between boldness and self-restraint, but now a newfound wisdom shines in her eyes. It's the look of someone who has been caged and is determined to never go back. Her prison sentence may have been short, but its lessons have proven to be lifelong. She didn't lose her spark. She learned how to control the fire. Number 10. Paris Hilton. Before reality TV and influencer culture became dominant, Paris Hilton was the definition of fame itself, a walking headline, a fantasy created by flashbulbs. She was the original celebrity famous for simply being famous, with her diamond-studded phone and her iconic catchphrase, "That's hot." She built an entire empire on a foundation of glamour and excess. But beneath the glossy surface and high fashion, Paris was living a double life, one defined by late-night chaos, reckless driving, and outright defiance. In the mid-2000s, her fast-paced party lifestyle finally caught up with her. Following a series of driving offenses and a failure to adhere to her probation, a judge mandated that she serve time in jail. The sight of Paris Hilton, the quintessential heiress, socialite and princess of pop culture, being led away in handcuffs marked one of the most surreal moments in contemporary celebrity history. The very world that once revered her now watched her weep inside a jail cell, stripped of her designer makeup, her freedom, and her control. Her stint behind bars lasted merely a few weeks, yet it sent shockwaves through the culture. Paparazzi descended in droves. Tabloids went into a frenzy, and critics declared it was justice served to the privileged. For Paris, it was a forced and public unmasking. She would later concede that jail had profoundly changed her, explaining that the isolation forced her to confront the fragility of her public persona. The experience shattered the character she had inhabited for years, the superficial blonde heiress, and exposed a frightened young woman who had lost her true self inside her own elaborate performance. After her release, Paris completely reinvented her life. She transformed her narrative into a lesson, speaking candidly about trauma, troubled teen facilities, and the immense mental toll of fame. She evolved into an advocate for accountability and healing, a path no one would have ever predicted for the woman who once personified excess. Paris Hilton didn't merely serve a jail sentence. She experienced a profound rebirth. Her mugshot transformed from a symbol of disgrace into one of awakening. Away from the diamonds and cameras, she finally understood what fame had taken from her: peace. Number 9. Heather Locklear. For decades, Heather Locklear was the very definition of television perfection, the golden-haired beauty who commanded primetime with shows like Melrose Place and Dynasty. She appeared to have it all: talent, charisma, and a brand of effortless appeal that made her one of the most iconic faces of the 1990s. But behind that glamorous facade, Heather was silently spiraling into a maelstrom of addiction. Anger and self-destruction that even her fame could not hide forever. Her public troubles began with numerous arrests tied to domestic altercations, driving under the influence, and even battery against the police officers responding to calls at her home. Each successive headline chipped away at the polished Hollywood image she had so carefully maintained. The public only witnessed the mugshots, her eyes swollen and makeup smeared, and quickly labeled her as just another fallen star. But the truth was far darker and more sorrowful. Heather was battling intense emotional pain and a dependency on prescription medication. She moved in and out of rehabilitation facilities, desperately trying to combat her demons, but they consistently found their way back to her. When she was ultimately sentenced to serve time in jail, it wasn't the dramatic fall of a diva. It was the utter collapse of a woman who had been performing happiness for decades. Her brief period of incarceration was followed by more intensive treatment, further attempts at recovery, and a slow retreat from the spotlight that had once defined her existence. Locklear moved on. Her fans never gave up hope for her comeback. Locklear's beauty had once made her a fantasy figure. Her subsequent vulnerability, however, made her human. In time, she began to find small pockets of peace, far from the glare of fame, and away from the chaos, but the world would never forget the moment her perfect image came crashing down. Heather's story is a haunting testament to how the brightest smiles can conceal the deepest pain, and how a cell door sometimes closes on more than just a crime. It closes on years of silent suffering. Number 8. Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes was once regarded as Hollywood's most promising young comedian. She was a Nickelodeon prodigy whose comedic timing and natural charm made her destined to be the next big thing. From The Amanda Show to She's the Man, she seemed utterly unstoppable, a unique blend of innocence and wit that made her adored by both audiences and critics. However, concealed by the public laughter, a perfect storm was gathering. The crushing forces of celebrity, mental health challenges, and substance dependency collided, culminating in one of the most devastating Hollywood spirals of her time. By the time she reached her early 20s, Amanda's life had devolved into a public spectacle of decline. Her peculiar social media posts, erratic conduct, and mounting legal woes transformed her from a promising talent into a relentless tabloid fixation. She was apprehended for driving while impaired, reckless endangerment, and even for tossing drug paraphernalia from her apartment window, with each incident becoming a viral headline overnight. The once luminous young woman who had brought laughter to millions was now simultaneously mocked and pitied. At one of her lowest points, Amanda was placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold, which led to her parents gaining legal control over her life through a conservatorship. This was followed by brief spells in jail and rehabilitation centers, each occasion sparking the same question from her fan base. What happened to Amanda Bynes? The answer was not simply fame or failure, but a deep-seated fragility. Hollywood has a history of consuming its child stars, only to feign shock when they eventually crumble. Years later, Amanda sought to redefine herself outside the realm of acting. She pursued studies in fashion, committed to her recovery, and began to speak with candor about her personal battles. Yet, the scars from her public breakdown, the infamous mugshots, the sensationalized headlines, and the widespread ridicule continue to linger like phantoms. Amanda Bynes' narrative is profoundly tragic because it extends beyond mere criminal acts. It is an indictment of a system that glorifies youth until it ultimately shatters it. And although her time spent incarcerated was minimal, the true prison was the nature of fame itself, the kind that never truly grants release. Number 7. Farrah Fawcett. Farrah Fawcett was far more than a television personality. She was the very definition of an era. With her legendary red swimsuit poster and a smile that could light up a room, she personified American glamour in a way few others could. But beneath the flawless image, Farrah harbored a restless soul and a defiant spirit that refused to bow to Hollywood's conventions. The very same inner fire that made her a superstar also led her into some of the most shadowed phases of her life, including a brief yet shocking run-in with the law. During the initial years after Charlie's Angels launched her into global stardom, Farrah's personal life began to fray at the edges. Her relationship with Ryan O'Neal was notoriously volatile, characterized by public arguments and emotional chaos. Then, a moment arrived that shattered her pristine reputation, an arrest for assault following a physical altercation. While the incident was legally minor, its cultural significance was monumental. The concept of America's sweetheart being placed in handcuffs left the public in disbelief. Although Farrah did not serve a long sentence, her booking photo became an obsession for the media. It wasn't the transgression that defined her, but the world's reaction to seeing that perceived perfection so visibly cracked. In an instant, the impeccable Farrah was humanized once more. She was flawed, emotional, and vulnerable, and this very humanity is what made her story so compelling. The press portrayed her as unstable, but the reality was far more intricate. Farrah was fighting to maintain control over her public image, her career, and her own identity. Hollywood had molded her into a symbol, not a person, and when she finally pushed back, the industry cast her into infamy. In her later years, she confronted cancer with exceptional fortitude. transforming her personal pain into a platform for activism. But even at the very end, the world could not forget that singular moment of rebellion. The night the golden girl of the 1970s found herself on the wrong side of the law. It was not, however, the end of her tale. But that was the instant the illusion of perfection shattered. Number 6. Reese Witherspoon. She was meant to embody the quintessential Hollywood success narrative. A belle from the South who ascended to stardom on the back of her talent, discipline, and undeniable charm. Legally blonde, to her Academy Award-winning portrayal in Walk the Line, she meticulously crafted a public persona of sophistication and intellect. She became the figure America placed its trust in, polite, industrious, and with a wholesome image. This is precisely why her arrest sent shockwaves through the public. The incident unfolded discreetly late one evening in Atlanta after her husband was stopped on suspicion of driving while impaired. Reese, who was in the passenger seat, made the critical error of challenging the law enforcement officers. Reports indicate she was highly emotional. "Do you know my name?" she purportedly questioned, a phrase that immediately became a viral sensation and cast a long shadow over her reputation for years to come. Just moments later, the very actress who had once portrayed America's most beloved lawyer was placed in handcuffs and faced charges of disorderly conduct. Her stay in custody was short-lived, yet the reputational damage was profound. The world was shown a side of her that wasn't the polished performer, but rather the potent influence of ego and a stark reminder of how swiftly fame can warp self-assurance into a sense of entitlement. Reese subsequently issued a public apology, describing her actions as both embarrassing and completely uncharacteristic of her true self. She confessed that the pressures of stardom had overwhelmed her and vowed to grow from the experience. Hollywood, ever a fan of a redemption story, granted her a second chance. However, Reese never truly forgot that night. The incident humbled her, fundamentally altered her approach to public life, and made her fiercely protective of her image. The reason her story struck such a chord with people wasn't the offense itself, but the raw humanity of the situation. It was the realization that even a figure as poised as Reese Witherspoon could falter in a brief moment of hubris. Her arrest served as a cautionary tale steeped in irony. The very woman whose career was founded on wit and elegance came to understand that true grace isn't about avoiding stumbles. It's about the resilience to rise again, especially when the cameras capture you at your most vulnerable. Number 5. Shelley Duvall. Shelley Duvall stood out as one of the most unique actresses of her era, fragile, haunting, and utterly unforgettable. She infused a peculiar, captivating beauty into every performance, from The Shining to Popeye, perfectly embodying characters who teetered on the brink between terror and naivety. Yet, away from the spotlight, Shelley herself started to drift towards that very same precipice. The immense pressures of Hollywood, combined with years of emotional solitude and a string of personal crises, gradually detached her from reality, leading her to become a recluse, living a life far from the celebrity that had once defined her. Her decline wasn't a public spectacle filled with scandalous headlines or lavish parties. Instead, it was a quieter, more sorrowful unraveling. During the 2000s, law enforcement in Texas were reported to have taken her into custody following several public disturbances, which involved bizarre and disoriented conduct that caused alarm among her neighbors and devoted fans. Shelley's actions weren't violent or criminal in the conventional meaning of the words. She was a person falling through the safety net of an industry that had long since cast her aside. Nevertheless, the instant she was detained, the tabloids seized the opportunity to sensationalize her plight, with headlines screaming that the shining star had lost her mind. Her time behind bars was not extensive. However, the image of a once revered actress in a delicate mental condition sent a chill through Hollywood. It compelled the industry to face the harsh reality of how cruelly it can treat its own vulnerable members. Shelley Duvall had been a muse for Stanley Kubrick, a discovery of Robert Altman's, and an emblem of fragile genius. Yet, in her moment of need for compassion, she was met with ridicule. Many years later, upon her return to the public eye for interviews, her speech was fragmented and her memories were hazy, but her inherent gentleness shone through. She voiced her profound loneliness, her deep-seated pain, and a desperate desire for safety. Her arrest was never truly about a criminal act. Instead, it was about a complete breakdown, the shattering of a mind strained beyond its limits by the pressures of fame. Her period in custody remains one of Hollywood's most hushed and heartbreaking sagas. The true prison wasn't one made of steel bars. It was the unseen fortress constructed by an industry that consumes talent and discards the broken spirits it leaves behind. Number 4, Taryn Manning. Taryn Manning consistently radiated a raw, electric energy, a performer capable of flipping from endearing charm to utter chaos in an instant. Viewers recognized her from 8 Mile, Hustle and Flow, and the hit series Orange is the New Black, where she, in a twist of irony, portrayed a deeply troubled inmate. However, as her celebrity status soared, life started to mirror her art in ways she could never have anticipated. The very actress who depicted addiction, instability, and defiance on screen soon discovered those exact same demons lurking for her when the cameras stopped rolling. Taryn's personal battles were hardly a secret. She spoke openly about her fights with mental health and her dependence on alcohol. Nevertheless, the tabloid headlines grew impossible to overlook, detailing assault allegations, public confrontations, restraining orders, and numerous arrests for unpredictable conduct. On one occasion, she faced accusations of assaulting a makeup artist. On another, she was apprehended for driving while under the influence. Her existence devolved into a dizzying merry-go-round of court appearances, mugshots, and public meltdowns, each incident fueling the very Hollywood machine that capitalizes on the downfall of its stars. When she was ultimately incarcerated, it seemed profoundly symbolic. The woman who portrayed a prisoner was now living that reality. For Taryn, jail was more than mere punishment. It was a stark reflection. In subsequent interviews, she confessed to feeling lost and consumed by anger, admitting that fame had ultimately isolated her far more than it ever set her free. "People are fascinated by you when you're broken," she once remarked, "but they have no idea how to help you mend." Following her release, she attempted to reconstruct her life through music and smaller acting parts, but controversy continued to orbit her name. The Hollywood industry had moved on, yet she could never completely break free from its grasp. Her narrative is one where the lines between fiction and reality became hopelessly blurred. A tale of success intertwined with self-destruction. Taryn Manning's period of incarceration wasn't the final chapter, but it was her most undeniable moment of reckoning. Beneath all the chaos was a woman desperate to be truly seen, not as a character she played, nor as the subject of a scandal, but as a human soul fighting to survive a level of fame that was devouring her whole. Number 3, Natasha Lyonne. Long before Netflix transformed her into a cult icon with Orange is the New Black and Russian Doll, Natasha Lyonne was one of the most brilliant yet deeply troubled young stars of the late 1990s Hollywood scene. Her star-making performances in American Pie and Slums of Beverly Hills seemed to guarantee a long and luminous career. But concealed behind her razor-sharp wit and untamed charisma was a woman slowly coming apart. Addiction, illness, and a reckless lifestyle consumed her 20s, quickly turning the beloved rising star into a cautionary tale splashed across headlines. By the early 2000s, Natasha's life had completely descended into chaos. She found herself evicted from her home and repeatedly hospitalized, and was ultimately arrested following a string of alarming incidents involving narcotics and property destruction. What ensued was a downward spiral through courtrooms and police blotters, where she faced the darker side of the fame machine that had once celebrated her, culminating in a jail sentence. The profound irony of the situation was lost on no one. An actress renowned for her rebellious on-screen persona was now confined by actual prison bars. While her time in custody was brief, the personal reckoning that followed would stretch on for years. Natasha would later recount this as her absolute lowest point, a moment of clarity where she understood that her immense talent was no match for her own self-destructive tendencies. She was fighting a severe battle with hepatitis, facing the brink of homelessness, and enduring profound isolation before she could even begin the arduous journey back toward a stable life. The industry had all but forgotten her, yet she was determined not to fade away. Upon her eventual return, Natasha made no attempt to conceal the wounds of her past. Instead, she transformed her pain into her craft. Her unfiltered humor and the profound wisdom she gained from her struggles became the very bedrock of her resurgence. And the public deeply connected with her authenticity. Her part in Orange is the New Black was far more than just another acting job. It was a form of catharsis, a healing process played out on screen. She masterfully reshaped her history of incarceration into a powerful emblem of survival. The saga of Natasha Lyonne demonstrates that true redemption isn't found in erasing the past, but in embracing it. The very woman who had fallen to the lowest depths constructed her comeback on a foundation of unvarnished truth, unyielding resilience, and a stubborn refusal to meet the tragic end that the industry had anticipated for her. Number 2, Shailene Woodley. Shailene Woodley never fit the conventional mold of a Hollywood celebrity. As her contemporaries pursued glamour and extravagance, she chose to spend her downtime trekking barefoot through nature. Passionately championing environmental causes and spurning the materialistic culture that so often defined her generation of actors, she became an icon of mindful, conscious living. Known for being thoughtful, down-to-earth, and genuine, this is precisely why the headlines announcing her arrest sent shockwaves through the public. The world was left in disbelief. What could the beloved star of Divergent and The Fault in Our Stars have possibly done to warrant such a thing? The answer was simple. She was taking a stand for her convictions. In 2016, Shailene was taken into custody during a nonviolent demonstration against the Dakota Access Pipeline. She had aligned herself with Indigenous activists to raise her voice against the threats of environmental damage and the potential contamination of vital water sources. However, as law enforcement advanced on the protesters, cameras documented the moment she was placed in handcuffs and escorted away. The resulting image was not one of a troublemaker, but one of profound courage. Nevertheless, the legal system was indifferent. She was formally charged with criminal trespassing and held in jail for a short time for having the audacity to protect the environment. This was a stark departure from the typical celebrity arrest. Shailene leveraged her public profile to shine a spotlight on the protest and the injustices faced by Native communities. The booking photo, which the tabloids eagerly attempted to frame as a moment of disgrace, was instead transformed into a symbol of honor. "I was simply one of hundreds who took a stand," she would later state, determined not to let the incident mute her voice. While her time in jail was brief, the experience permanently altered her outlook on the world. She described how it dismantled her sense of comfort and compelled her to witness systemic injustice firsthand. While the Hollywood machine labeled it a controversy, Shailene simply called it the truth. In a city fixated on maintaining a perfect image, She put her own reputation on the line for something tangible and meaningful. This is the core of what makes her story so compelling. It's not about the fact that she was incarcerated, but that she did so in service of others. At a time when most celebrities guard their fame jealously, Shailene Woodley demonstrated that true integrity can sometimes lead to being placed in restraints. Number 1. Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart was more than a mere public figure. She was a veritable empire. She was the undisputed queen of perfection. From the ground up, she constructed a multi-million-dollar enterprise dedicated to teaching the nation the art of living a beautiful life. Her very name became synonymous with success, impeccable taste, and absolute control. Each dinner party she orchestrated and every magazine cover she appeared on solidified a single powerful image. Martha always came out on top. Then, in a shocking turn of events that even the most creative Hollywood screenwriter couldn't have conceived, the nation's foremost icon of order and refinement was escorted to prison to serve time for a white-collar offense. In the early 2000s, she was found guilty of obstructing justice and making false statements to federal investigators who were conducting an insider trading inquiry. The shock to the world wasn't about the crime itself, but rather who committed it. Martha Stewart, the very woman who had instructed millions on how to perfectly decorate cupcakes and fold dinner napkins, was suddenly dressed in a prison uniform. The tabloids erupted, branding it the spectacular fall of the domestic goddess. A throng of cameras gathered outside the correctional facility, treating it with the same fervor as the Academy Awards. Inside, however, Martha maintained her composure. Reports emerged that she was teaching cooking classes to her fellow inmates, carrying herself with a quiet, unwavering dignity. But the undeniable truth is that her sentence, despite being only 5 months long, fundamentally rewrote her entire public story. When she finally walked free, the world no longer perceived a simple lifestyle icon. They saw a survivor. She may have lost millions of dollars, but she gained something far more potent: authenticity. Instead of retreating from the spotlight, she fully embraced her past. She made jokes about her prison time on talk shows and began meticulously rebuilding her brand. She returned more powerful than ever, co-hosting a show with Snoop Dogg, launching new product lines, and serving as a reminder that scandal cannot diminish true skill. The story of Martha Stewart is the ultimate Hollywood paradox, a woman who journeyed from being the queen of class to a federal inmate and somehow managed to turn her downfall into a masterclass on reinvention. Her time in prison did not break her. It crowned her the definitive comeback queen in the saga of American fame. Celebrity can build empires and tear them down in the blink of an eye. These women once commanded the screen, beloved by millions. But behind the curtain of fame lay a world of choices, chaos, and heavy consequences. Some succumbed to addiction, others were undone by arrogance, and a select few fell because of their own courage. Their time behind bars stripped away all the glamour, leaving behind only the unvarnished truth. In the final analysis, it wasn't a matter of guilt or innocence. It was a story of humanity. Hollywood may be quick to forget its fallen stars, but the world has a long memory for the fall itself, because in that town, the spotlight always burns its brightest, right before it goes dark.